It was an event that named a generation, a rock concert unlike any that had preceded it. Over 500,000 people cavorted in the mud, listening peacefully to performers from Joan Baez to Jimi Hendrix, despite lack of food and facilities. But 25 years after the summer of 1969, is the Woodstock spirit still alive? Can such a spontaneous event be recreated? And what did Woodstock really mean? Joining me now, John Roberts, one of the promoters of the original event and a promoter of Woodstock 94. Michael Wadleigh, who won an Oscar for his documentary Woodstock. Dallas Taylor, former drummer for Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And Young, who performed the original concert and is the author of Prisoner of Woodstock. Elizabeth Wurtzel, who won the 1986 Rolling Stone College Journalism Award and is the author of the forthcoming Prozac Nation. Also Charles Kaiser, historian of the 1960s and formerly with the New York Times. I'm pleased to have each of you here. And as I said earlier, the more you talk among each other, give an audience an opportunity to eavesdrop on a conversation about Woodstock, the better we are. I begin with Charles Kaiser. Set up 1969 because your book about 1968, in a sense, showed you where we were as a nation.
It's the year after the peak of the 60s, in a sense. 1968 was the year when everything seemed possible and only some of it was. The moment when all of our impulses toward violence, idealism, diversity, and disorder peaked to produce the greatest possible hope and the worst imaginable despair. The tremendous hope that we felt in the spring of 1968 when Gene McCarthy and Bobby Kennedy drove Lyndon Johnson out of the presidency, followed by the terrible despair produced by the deaths of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy within 2 months of each other. But we also had a wonderful synergy between music and politics, which is one of those things which you can't quantify or prove, but if you were there, you know it was happening.
That marriage took place when, you think?
Well, I think throughout the 60s. Yeah. I mean, the combination of Bob Dylan's songs and Gene McCarthy's political campaign, both mystic poets from Minnesota, was a very powerful combination.
Okay. How did this get started? Who started it, and how did you end up there?
Well, it's a bit of an accident, I think. We were trying to build a recording studio in Woodstock, New York. There were 4 of us: Joel Rosenman, my partner, Michael Lang, and Artie Kornfeld. And we thought we'd kick off that recording studio with a little party, maybe a press party, invite some local musicians to play, like Bob Dylan. And I guess it just got out of hand. We dropped the recording studio and went with the party. And what happened to us was we couldn't find a site. We started in Saugerties, New York, at the site coincidentally we're using this year. And then we moved to Wallkill. And we were kicked out of Wallkill with 5 weeks to go. And rather than throw in the towel, we rather recklessly decided to give it a try anyway. Went up to White Lake, where we had 5 of the rainiest weeks, I think, since Noah. And,
yes.
Mike Wadleigh can tell you this is true.
Right.
And we came down, we had to triage the
You were looking for the Ark there at one point, were you?
Absolutely, we found it, I think.
We came down to a decision which was fairly stark: either build the gates and the fences or build the stage. Yeah. And obviously we decided to build the stage. We were helped in this decision by the fact there were 50,000 people camped out in the performance area the Wednesday before the event. So we knew that this was going to be somewhat
But it was for the people who came, and any of you pick up on this, and especially, I mean, musicians, it was for the people who came a musical event. It was not a cultural phenomenon. It was not, to me, a political event. It was a...
Well, but for me, I went to Columbia, so I was familiar with the village independently of John.
Right.
And I knew that in 1919, in the village of Woodstock, the American Communist Party was founded. And there had been many famous activists living there in the 20s who were very active during the Depression, that the village really stood for counterculture, for left-wing politics, for a kind of anti-materialism. So when John and his partners walked into my office, I think that I brought another kind of resonance to it. I'd been making political documentaries and others for this very station, for NET, NET Journal and all the others. And so perhaps I picked up on a kind of mythology that maybe continued in the movie, which was that I saw this as a sort of back to the land, back to the garden, beautiful sort of event that combined, as you were saying earlier, politics and music, where even if you look at the film that I edited, virtually every one of the songs has to do with politics or social action, from the opening song by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. It's been a long time coming, where you see the stage being built, and you hear the lines, speak out against the madness, speak your mind if you dare. And I guess the whole film, which then created this kind of mythology, which is maybe what we ought to address, what was the real Woodstock and what is the mythological Woodstock?
I want to get to that. Thank you for leading me there. But let me, Dallas, you're coming in on a helicopter?
Yes.
And you hate flying. And I mean, you're scared to death.
Two things that I'm afraid of is flying in helicopters and large crowds. So.
But so set it for me in terms of what happened for you, a sense of the mood of the place before I go to Jimi Hendrix on
essentially, it was our second concert, and really,
What was your first?
I don't even remember. I mean, and we were very unrehearsed. We were barely, able to remember the songs, and we were very nervous about it. Our album was very successful, and Neil had just joined the band, so things were really tenuous at best. So when I found myself asking the helicopter pilot what the name of that large lake was, and he told me that was Woodstock, I panicked, and immediately did more drugs. So that didn't help the
Which
situation.
Which is what this book
anymore.
is about. Yeah. Go ahead.
And but what happened is when we landed, we almost crashed. By the way, the helicopter started coughing. Yeah, and it was like kind of me and Graham kind of looked at each other and said goodbye. But John Sebastian met me when we came out of the helicopter and started walking me through the crowd, and what I realized that my fear was replaced by this overwhelming sense of safety. It was as though I was a kid in my own backyard. Now that's the way I describe it. And all of a sudden I realized that, this isn't just another concert. It's not even about the music. And it turned into something else altogether for me and David and Stephen and Graham and Neil. And it affected us in such a way that, I went there being a smart kid who wanted to be a rock and roll star and buy a new Ferrari, and I didn't buy any of this, new age Aquarian crap. I just wanted to be rich and famous and be a drummer.
Yeah, and find a woman.
Well, that wasn't the problem.
He had too many of them.
Yeah. All right, take me back once from your generation. Look back at it as how you saw it as a cultural phenomenon.
Well, I think.
Or see it.
I have almost no memories of.
You were
obviously.
2 at the time, or
I was
something.
2, and
Yeah.
I think that what I've been saying that I think is sad is I think it probably was this great thing, this great moment in time, and I do think unfortunately that the nostalgia that's attached to it now tends to actually cloud and bog down what was in fact significant about it in and of itself. I think that this is a problem that we have in America with many things, D-Day, whatever it is. I feel like the event itself, which was, it was either beautiful or horrible, I don't really know. I mean, I wasn't there, but I've heard so much about it. I think the memories of it and, the real feeling of it really tends to get lost in this constant, overwhelming, barraging urge that everybody has to, mythologize it. And I think it's very sad. I think it, whatever was going on there for you people, you people,
You older people.
no, I mean it's very. I think it's natural that people my age tend to respond. I mean, LSD, let the 60s die, kind of thing, because it all does, the message seems to have gotten lost, and I think it must have been a stupendous thing, and I think some of us wish we had been there, some of us are sick of hearing about it, but whatever it is, it's not, it's just overwhelmed by its own myth.
It's a useful myth, and I think we Americans in particular are great myth spinners, and we need these myths to remember ourselves, I think, and the times that were past in a better way. And there are so many myths and legends about Woodstock. There's the sense that politically it was a monolithic time, which of course it wasn't. There were 500,000 people the same age in Vietnam that weekend as there were in Woodstock. 6 months earlier, or 9 months earlier, we'd elected Richard Nixon to the White House. There was nothing particularly...
My mother voted for him.
Nothing particularly monolithic about the time. But, it's like our parents used to tell us, when I was a kid, things were simpler and they were better and people dealt with each other more honestly. And I think if you misremember that sort of thing, then you probably misremember yourself at an earlier time too. And we Americans seem to want to remember the past very kindly.
So what is...
But this trivializes, I think this
Yeah,
really
it does.
trivializes the 60s, and it's because all that's left now is for us to lampoon it. You know,
Yes.
for that Pepsi ad that, you know, is like, oh, those people, now they're into pesto instead of brown acid or whatever it is. I mean, I think that something real happened there that was very significant, and I don't just mean at Woodstock. I mean, the Vietnam War was a terrible thing that, you know, the youth of America rose up and objected to. And all of these things get lost in people just saying, oh, those 60s people, now they're yuppies, now they're venture capitalists, now they're...
All right, let me jump. What important happened there? You want to speak to that, Charles, or go ahead?
Happened at Woodstock?
Yeah,
Or happened in that era? I mean, what was important about the era, I think, was that it was anti-materialistic, as you were saying before, and I think that's the worst thing that happened, that we lost sight of that so quickly. Martin Luther King said that we had to move from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, and that has never happened. In fact, I think my generation has become even greedier than our parents' generation, which is a really depressing thing to watch.
Let me come to... Go ahead, Michael.
My daughter calls it, it was the spirit then, and now it's the stuff. And I know MTV is starting a channel, you know, like the QVC channel, that's going to be called The Goods. I mean, we might think of the 60s as mythologizing the good, you know, meaning doing good. And now you want to have the goods, as it were. But let's go back to the myth for a moment. I mean, that I'm looking over there at the wonderful logo that the original festival had, which was the dove sitting on the guitar and 3 days of peace and music. I think that went a long way to creating the myth, in as much as that dove stood for, of course, anti-war. Well, what's the legacy in that? I don't think that we'll ever approach another war after Vietnam and not think at least once or twice about, is this a good idea? Do we want to have our boy come home in a box or our girl come home in a box? Also ecology. I mean, this was a wonderful event that took us back to the land, back to the garden, back to a kind of innocence that I think that we all want. So the dove stood for the ecology movement, which after all is still with us. It's not like it was part of something back then. I think it also stood for human rights. You know, when Richie Havens, who opens the festival, sings that incredible song of freedom, you know what he's talking about. And so many of the issues that were dealt with in the songs of the time had to do with these ideals, which I would argue to you are still alive and well, at least in an aspirational sense. In the same way I think about the festival, that when you think about Yasgur's Farm, I mean, you think of this beautiful place that you can leave these nasty cities, you know, with all the complications and all the violence and everything, and you literally can journey out. Well, one of the reviewers is talking about the Woodstock movie as the Canterbury Tales, and that the notion is that when you see that stage go up, it's like building a cathedral in the wilderness, and you see the pilgrims streaming there, and sure enough, the choirs get up on the stage, you know, and sing the hymns, and the priests, you know, deliver the sermons, and the congregation communes with itself and nature, and they break bread and so on. I think this is like a timeless thing that humans need. What I think I worry about coming up to today is this, you know, that we have one ideology. Yeah, I mean, this is the one ideology that was left. I covered the fall of the Berlin Wall, and of course, in Hegel's terms, this was truly the end of history. We have only materialism left, and the sort of unity of it. Get your communal hamburger out there. I think the thing that I worry about, and I know John has heard me say this on other programs, is that I hate to see the Woodstock generation be subsumed by the Pepsi generation. So back then, when it was free expression, you opened your mouth and you said something. Now you open your mouth and shove a Pepsi in it.
But do I hear both of you saying that the idea of promoting, of having a new Woodstock 25 years later was a bad idea, or simply was done badly in terms of the...
No, I think a new Woodstock, as it were, is a very good idea. I think I agree with John in saying that what are 50-year-olds like us having anything to do with it? A new Woodstock perhaps would take place in Seattle, which is sort of the metaphoric home of the counterculture.
Yeah. We have that. We had Lollapalooza in 1991.
But that's not a Woodstock.
Let me tell you.
I'm
Can
sorry.
I interject here? I just got through talking to a young bass player who's in a band called Porno for Pyros.
Right.
And this kid is so excited about the fact that he's going to play at Woodstock. And you know what? Just the fact that there's something for these kids to look forward to, and they're embracing it as their own. It's not about us anymore, and that's what's cool about it. And it's not a big deal. It's, you know, allow these kids to have fun and allow them to have their event. And
But the myth is more than fun.
I was going to say this.
Very patronizing.
what's patronizing
I mean,
about
so why does it have to be organized by 50-year-olds? I mean, why can't we? I feel that we have attempted, on some level. We had this Lollapalooza thing, which unfortunately now we have the sequel every year to that. Which
Did you go to Lollapalooza?
I went to the first one, and I have to say
Did you see the guy that was chewing glass? That was charming.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I mean, in 1991, the first time it happened, it was kind of a neat experiment to see if rap music people, alternative rock people, industrial people could all get together and have a concert and attract an audience and do this thing together. And I mean, certainly it was planned and it was not Woodstock, but it was a neat and interesting thing. And then after that, Nirvana broke out, and that was in '91, and then you have this like alternative nation thing emerge.
Let me just throw one thing out. What's wrong with, celebrating as they did the sacrifices that were made and honor the sacrifices that were made at Normandy and having the people who were participating in that go back? And what's wrong with people in the 50s planning a Woodstock? Does it have to be mutually exclusive from a coming together of young musicians at a different time?
No,
Do those things have to conflict with each other?
No, not at all. I just think that that was a surprise. I think Lollapalooza, in its strange way, was a surprise the first time. Now already it's become an annual event, like everything else in this country, which they can't leave well enough alone with. Yeah, and corporately sponsored. But I think that's kind of my feeling with Woodstock, is that it was what happened in 1969 was, on some levels, a surprise. On some levels, it was planned. I mean, I think that people are missing how much more it was planned than people realize.
But it took on a life of its own because of so many factors, including the weather.
Yeah, why not honor that, remember that? It's beautiful, it's great. Have a bunch of people from there get together at the bottom line and do songs from that era or something.
Before I go to Jimi Hendrix, John.
I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding here about what we're trying to do. We are not trying to resurrect 1969. We're trying to throw a great rock and roll party because a new generation has come of age. There's a lot of generational rage here. We baby boomers are the most self-obsessed, narcissistic bunch in the history of America, and we're not going gently into the woods.
Oh, Generation X says that about baby boomers?
They're right. And we've told Generation X or grunge or slackers or whatever we want to call them, whatever pejorative names we have them, they're not going to live as well as we did. They don't have our values. They don't have our social concerns. It's nonsense. Yeah. More of them are going to die of AIDS than of us died in Vietnam. We didn't have to go to metal detectors when we went to school. The environment has been infinitely more degraded today than it was in our era, and we seem to be picking on them because we don't want to let go of center stage. It's not our festival, it's not our party, and it's their party. One thing I just like to take issue with Mike, who's an old friend, he mystifies me in one respect. He seems to be saying to me that his form of commerce, the making and selling of movies, is somehow noble, but other forms of commerce, the making and selling of T-shirts, is not. I don't understand the philosophical underpinning of that argument.
Well, I think it has to do with content. I mean, and Neil Young and I both distribute films on Warner's, but Warner's doesn't have anything to say about the content of the film. I think what I object to, John, is something like this, that why do we have to attach Pepsi to Woodstock? Why do we have to confuse the mythology? Why do we have to say, in effect, that Pepsi is equal to Woodstock, when in the mythology it certainly isn't? One is counterculture, one is establishment.
Well, I would argue that...
I don't put the Pepsi Cola logos in my movie, for example.
But
Never would.
Michael, why is it in any way less commercial or less noble to sell a movie ticket than it is a Pepsi can? I don't understand the argument.
Because in the one sense, if you look at the movie is completely countercultural, I would argue to you. It's not an establishment movie. Whereas if we had filled it with Pepsi logos, it would have completely changed the
Did you make a lot of money off the movie, Michael?
Both John and I did.
Not John.
Became the dominant culture. That was
sure you're not John.
That counterculture has become the dominant culture. It's kind of a silly distinction, don't you think?
I don't think it has at all. I would say that the counterculture, if you looked up the definition, it was left-wing politics, and you...
Let me just interrupt because I want to have something here, get something in terms of video representation of what took place, in fact, at Woodstock 25 years ago. Here it is, Jimi Hendrix, the Star-Spangled Banner. Take a look.
Political.
It's unbelievable. Let me just make a couple of quick points. As we were watching this, you say in the recut you see more of Hendrix, and he's still the best.
Yeah. I mean, here we are 25 years later, and without a doubt, I think you see why he's considered to be the greatest electric guitarist that ever lived. Eric Clapton told me, he said, the first time I saw Hendrix play, I wanted to throw away my guitar. He was so intuitive, as you see. But of course, I made the other point during the break that this is now the most famous piece of political rock and roll ever. It's played after the Rolling Stones concert, U2, Guns N' Roses, Neil Young, whatever. It becomes a symbol of what Woodstock was all about.
And you say it was the moment.
Well, it was the greatest.
But you also said it was the highest paid moment.
I'm going to get to that in terms of what. Well, go ahead. But you said it was the best moment.
Michael seems to be grafting politics onto Woodstock, and I think that's a personal decision on his part. In point of fact, Woodstock was decidedly apolitical. When Abbie Hoffman tried to seize the stage for Harangue, Pete Townsend knocked him off.
That was a great,
But Dallas, you were saying that Hendrix came on. He was really angry at the time because it was near the end of the whole.
Yeah, he of course was supposed to close the show, but it got so behind schedule that he didn't end up playing until 9 a.m. in the morning, and everybody was gone. So he was and justified.
But of course, then in the end, Hendrix came down to see the film afterwards, and he stayed and saw it 4 times. He was so delighted. But maybe this is the point. The event is one thing, and then the film extends the event to tens of millions around the world, and then maybe subsumes whatever the real
What
event
else was
was.
important about these rock stars? Ellen Willis in the Rolling Stone History of Rock and Roll writes about Janis Joplin. Her metamorphosis from ugly duckling of Port Arthur to the peacock of Haight-Ashbury meant that a woman who was not conventionally pretty, who had acne and a weight problem and hair that stuck out, could invent her own beauty out of sheer energy, soul, sweetness, and a sense of humor, and thereby change the very notions of attractiveness.
No, I would argue to you she was one of the greatest blues singers that's ever lived.
I'm not contradicting anything.
No,
I
but
said.
it leaves it out. It simply leaves it out. I mean, what was her value to people? Not that she had acne or was overweight, but as my daughter said when she saw the new director's cut, she said, Daddy, I've never heard anyone sing like this before.
Well, of course, she was a fabulous singer, but it was also a completely different kind of woman role model than we'd ever had before.
Of course, now we're left with the Pepsi generation performers who won't put that kind of emotional honesty into their music.
Michael, this may distress you terribly, but I doubt that there's a movie theater playing your theater where someone can't go in and buy Pepsi. So you are contributing to the sales of Pepsi by distributing these movies.
As long as it's separate, I don't mind.
Let me just, real quick, I got less than a minute. John, what do you think Woodstock means today?
Well, I think this generation is going to make up their own mind. The surprise of Woodstock today is yet to be, because it's happening this weekend. 250,000 people approximately are coming to a spectacularly beautiful site, right, to hear the greatest array of bands, we think, in modern times, possibly since the original Woodstock. And they'll tell us if it means anything. We can't tell them.
What does it mean today?
I think it means some hope for the kids of this generation to have an event that's going to somehow equal or emulate the spirit that we experienced.
I'm going to skip Charles because you set it up. What do you think it means today?
Vainglorious baby boom nostalgia.
Vainglorious? Michael?
I hope it means going back to the garden, back to something more fundamental that we as human beings long for.
And lost?
And we've lost it.
Okay. Yeah. I thank all of you. It's a pleasure to have you here as we go out over credits with Janis Joplin at Woodstock. Here it is.
You got to see it.
Useless down here. I can't find me anybody to love me. Never looked around. I've looked everywhere, and I can't find me anyone to love, to feel my pain. So, honey, don't you go and leave me now. No. When you're all alone, every day I keep pushing, I keep trying. to move forward, but something is surrounding me. Wow, bad. Something's trying to hold on to me.